with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to remind everybody, this is a work session. No decisions are made tonight. So I do appreciate everybody that's here. So first on our agenda is mayor and council updates. And I'm going to start over here with Mr. Jay Hahn tonight.
I don't have much. I spoke to a business owner, I believe it's Wilson Drive up headed towards the hospital. It's considered a street, but it's an alley. And they were just wondering if that could possibly get graded out or straightened out a little bit. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah, as soon as they get out enough, the guys will get on them.
Okay, cool.
All right.
That's all I have, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilman Stuvel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to everybody who's attending tonight. I have two updates, I think, Mayor. One is from the Energy and Environment Task Force. Kara Kolovich, who's been lending her exceptional leadership talents to that group for a long time now, is going to be transitioning away from coordinating the organization, coordinating the group. She's gotten a really phenomenal job offer that will take up some more of her time. So the group had a discussion about the capacity that they had, the skill sets they'd be looking at, and trying to figure out how to plan for that transition. It won't be abrupt. And I just want to offer my deep gratitude to Kara for her exceptional work over many, many years with bringing information forward, keeping that group organized, and she's just done a really great job. Also, the group recommended to, I think, working with Lance, so Regine, correct me here if I don't have this correct, that a smart water grant for consideration for the golf course, where we have some inefficient pumping problems and some over watering, and there was a grant that E&E identified that might help with some funds for those pumps. And lastly, Mayor, I just want to offer deep condolences, Councilman Cox, and to Karen. The Coach Arms, he'll be remembered in the community as a pillar and as a real legend, and many, many of us are mourning alongside you. Take care, and give our love to Karen too. Thanks, Mayor. That's what I have.
Okay, Councilman Cox?
All right, thank you, Councilman Stubble, for those remarks. I will let Karen know. And also just on update, as far as the school district goes, we are still hosting our community resource meeting, which will be April 4th, 2024, from 1 to 4 p.m. I want to clarify that it's not necessarily community and parent invite meeting. It's a resource planning solution focused meeting. So what that means basically is as it pertains to substance abuse, mental health services, and other related resources for our students and young adults in our community, what we're finding is, and some of this has been contributed over a long period of time. And when I say long, it's, since 2020, we're 4 years out, and we have been seeing a significant increase in need for mental health services and substance abuse services and other community related needs. And there's a lot of barriers to those services. And so what we're trying to do as resource providers is come up with areas that we need to focus on and that we can be solution based, that we can start providing resources locally and how to leverage all of our resources and not just be in silos. And so there's going to be some really good discussion, but it's not necessarily open to the public. I just wanted to clarify that. Certainly, if a community member hops into the community center, we wouldn't kick them out, but it's more of an opportunity for us as providers to discuss where our barriers are and start working together in a collective effort. That's happening. And also it's spring break for the schools. And so I sit as a liaison for the school district and I work for them, so it can be a little bit cloudy. So I like to make that clear, they're doing some really great things moving forward to finish the school year. So just keep that in mind that, May is fast approaching and I couldn't be more excited for it. As far as the LEDA update, they are still discussing the possibility of a full-time ED position. Missy, our Councilwoman White, was able to attend a meeting where they discussed the potential of a part-time. They're looking at how they can be self-sufficient and work through that to really start to enhance some of our goals and our strategic planning as it references economic development. They also partner with there's the outdoor, I don't want to say this wrong. Thank you, Wyoming Outdoor Weekend, which has been a really cool partnership with them. And that's happening in May. Yep, third weekend in May. So that'll be exciting. And that's a good event in our community and something that they're always involved in. And then I think that's it they did talk a lot. We talked about the gymnastics event that took place and how we can all collaborate differently to make sure that we enhance that in our community. And I did see some really great things through our business owners that I think were beneficial for the 400 some gymnasts and their families that were here. That is all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Hahn?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the city crews again. They went out and they fixed all those potholes, and then we had weather. It came in and rained and ruined a lot of the work they did. And they got right back there and redid them. And the material that they used this last go around, I think is a lot better material, and it seems to be holding a lot better, but they got out there pretty quick and took care of that. So thank you very much for that.
Missy? That's one white, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll definitely echo the gratitude for the efforts of pothole filling. It seems like, I mean, unfortunately, it's also resembling whack-a-mole. And, you know, as soon as they can knock one out, other ones pop up, but sure appreciate their efforts for that very much. And I'll also echo Councilwoman Stuble's condolences to you. Yeah, it's that tragedy. Your father-in-law was certainly one of the icons of Lander and is deeply missed. Planning Commission met last week and continues to just pour all kinds of energy and very detailed thought into recommendations that will be coming before us. Senior Center won't meet until the Tuesday of our business meeting next month, but they did have a great day with cinnamon rolls. Helping to get that word out about them. A lot of folks aren't aware of the ginormous cinnamon rolls for $3. So they look pretty amazing. And then lastly, there is a workshop tomorrow. I believe it's free, being offered by the Equality State Policy Center and Wyoming Tax Facts as a recap of property tax related bills that didn't happen in this season's legislature. So I'd encourage folks, if you're available to that, to register for that and listen in. I believe it's being offered over Zoom. And that is it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Larson?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to update everyone, the rodeo is, we're only in February and March, and they're going full speed ahead, to get the rodeo lined up, and it takes all that time to get it put together by July. But things are coming together there. Also the state gymnastics meet, that's not been something that I normally attend, but had some young ladies there that I associate with that were performing in that, and I was impressed. The whole thing went together very, very well, and I know when we talked in the chamber, that they had offered to help out a lot of different ways there, and it seems like that everything come together, and it was very successful. So kudos to Lander and to the gymnasts and to everybody else associated with that. We've had a group working on the fly-in. It will be August 24th this year, and right now, we currently have really close to $12,000 dedicated to that, with half of that coming from private individuals. And we're hoping that the city will donate the $2,000 to $3,000 in fuel that we've done in the past. And but I think that it's coming together well, and it ought to be a it ought to be a fun one.
I kind of missed it last year.
Yeah, yeah, you know, and, um, you know, Riverton was really thrilled, you know, because they had about 500 people there. And, talking with the Riverton group, because, you know, typically we're, you know, 2,000 to 3,000,
Yeah.
maybe 4. And, yeah, it's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
So appreciate that.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I just, a little bit of my updates, just let you know that Lincoln Street project's out for bids. They're due this week. So keep our fingers crossed that we get some good bids in. So, and that's moving forward. Like I said, everybody's working hard in the city, so I appreciate everybody that works for the city right now. There's crews out there doing jobs that we don't see them, but they're out there working hard. So just to let recognition that everybody's working hard for the city. So, and I'll just kind of leave it at that and we'll move on to staff updates. Chief Peters.
Okay, just a couple things. Next meeting, you'll see a job description come across that's a part-time records clerk. It's not a new position. It's been in my budget since I've been here. 2021, the last person that was working it left and we just haven't filled it. But with our increased activity and everything else that we have, there's a lot more paperwork that we're having to do. So this is we're gonna get the job description in front of you first, because there's been a few tweaks on it. And then we'll advertise it to try to get somebody in there to help Dwayne and help with the record stuff. The other thing, you know how it always works, where I was touting up how we went a whole year without losing an officer. Well, we have Detective Wangberg's leaving us to go to DCI, which is a promotion for him and it's a step up in his career, which kind of, it hurts here, but you know what, that's our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is to build people up, to make them leaders. And then, you know what, hopefully we could keep them. But in this case, you know what, we can't offer what he can get and what his specialty is. So with that being said, we've opened up, today we closed the internal process when it comes to filling the detective position. So there will be a promotion coming from within. We just haven't had the interviews yet. That should be done in the next week. And then you've also probably seen where we've advertised laterally for a patrol officer. The hope is with that, that's open till April 3rd, which we've had several applications come in already for that. If we can get that all wrapped up and have that new officer in-house by the end of April, beginning of May, and then we can move on from there. The only other thing, just want to cover, I'm sure you've seen our increased presence, which has been dramatic in the last 2 or 3 months, because we've actually finally with a new captain on board, and then also we've been able to gear in and really go into our high visibility aspects of trying to drive down crime. There's been a few grumblings about that because you know what, anytime you have lights out there or anytime somebody gets stopped, you know what, people get upset occasionally. But I just wanted to let you know how it's working. So to put in comparison, our activity in the department's up 122% so far this year. So it's dramatically increased. A lot of that is we really focused on Main Street. That's where people are seeing us a lot because we're trying to get the crashes down. But if you look at the number, our overall calls are down 12% this year. Our crashes are down 47.1%. So the ultimate goal of getting our crashes down on Main Street is working golden. But in the same essence, which is the side effect, which you can't, is we always worry about shoplifting, right? You know, how do we get shoplifting down? We can't have an officer in the stores. Our shoplifting is down 47% also. I don't think it's a coincidence when you look at that. We targeted Main Street for our crashes, which happen to be where the majority of our retail theft is. So I just wanted to throw those numbers out at you, just so you understand that, you know what, it's working. What we're trying to do is actually working, the focused high visibility. It's upsetting some folks that were out there and that they might be getting stopped. But you know what, overall, it's doing exactly what you want your police department to do. Crimes down, thefts down, everything is down right now. And it's working like a charm so far. So if you hear grumblings, which I'm probably sure you have, because I've heard more than a few of them, understand that there is a process and what we're actually doing is working when it comes to keeping our city safe. And if you have any questions.
Any questions? Councilman Larson?
Sorry, there we go. Would you explain for me and maybe others that are unaware also what a lateral police officer is?
What a lateral police officer is already a certified police officer. So they've already been through the academy. They've already graduated the academy and they're already working in the industry.
Okay,
So we're in a unique position where we're enticing to outside folks to where a lot of places don't get those applicants. So what it is a lot of places end up hiring somebody who is not a lateral, just an entry level. That's a person that is totally green. So we have to bring them in, we have to train them, we have to send them to the academy, where we're in a unique position with our department and our city that we're in such a good spot that by putting it out laterally, normally you don't see just put out lateral for lateral officers. But we've had more than a few inquiries since I've been here. I call it a waiting list of people wanting to get here. So long story short, what that is that's already somebody pre-certified. So that's somebody who already is an officer that we can bring in and plug and play. We just have to train them on what lander is, how we operate here, but they already have all their certifications and they're already set professionally.
good deal. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilman White?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I want to say thank you for bringing all of these statistics to us on a regular basis and including that end of year report. Mostly because when constituents reach out to me and say, hey, what's going on with, I'm seeing the police out more and more, I can speak knowledgeably to it. And then they finish that with like, wow, way to go, Lander PD, keep up the great work. So yeah, I can understand why you're getting the complaints, but thankfully I end up getting lots of compliments and want to direct them your way. So thank you for that.
Anybody else?
I do have
Councilman?
a comment too.
Go ahead,
We can go
one of
down
you.
the line.
Councilman Hahn? Go ahead.
I just want to say, thank you also, Chief. You can't hardly drive down one of these major avenues. I'll be driving even up to 25 mile an hour, but a lot of times a little bit less than that. There will be somebody right on your tail. And so to tell you the truth, I think it's really needed. We got a lot of people that like to drive fast in this town. Thank you.
This is good for comments.
Yep.
One comment that I had and maybe you can say this is correct or not, is Safeway Corporation, from my understanding, is no longer charging shoplifters. Is that correct? Do you know?
I don't know if that's true or not. I know we're at the mercy of, there's a lot less calls related to their business than with Mr. D's. So I always chalked it up to my first few years here is that they just weren't either really good at catching them, but it could be they're catching them and they're not reporting it.
It's my understanding that the corporation has made a statement that they would not be dealing with shoplifters. I'm being a little strategic in asking you this. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I actually do want it in the newspaper. I think that's a mistake. We have several of our young people that are going there and stealing. I know for a fact, and I turned them in and I was told we don't prosecute shoplifters.
I know
So-
I know we've dealt with a few there in the last few months, but I can clarify with the manager.
Yeah, and I think if we could, whatever we can do to, I know that there's medication leaving that store without being paid for and is being used to get high. And they are targeting Safeway because they don't get charged.
Okay. Anybody else? None?
Okay.
Okay,
I guess,
go ahead, chief.
I guess the one last thing, since you talked about getting high, the legislature passed a law which is going to make Delta 9 and all the other deltas related to it illegal, which I'm trying to get clarification on exactly, because some of the language, it's good, but some of the language is muddy. So in turn, we're trying to get clarification on exactly July 1st, what becomes illegal. The one thing which I'll say personally is they should have added kratom while they're at it. If you're gonna delve into the deltas, we should have got kratom out of the equation. But, so when I know more, I'll line it out to you guys so you understand. But where they did good is they didn't lock it into the isomers, like they did with spice back in the day. They locked it into the isomer, so then all I had to do was change one little isomer, and then all of a sudden, that product was still legal. Where this one, they encompassed the delta side, the whole hemp aspect of it. So it's gonna be interesting come July because there's a lot of that in our shops. And it might actually get into the aspect of what's being sold at our gas stations too. So there's gonna need to be a lot of education, not just for the law enforcement to enforce it, but we need to get clarification so we could sit down with anybody who sells it in our town, so they clearly understand what they're selling. And so they don't end up ordering something in, not understanding it, and then next thing you know, they're technically becoming a drug dealer. So.
Mayor, thank you for bringing that up. That is a huge win as it relates to THC. And currently in both the vape shop and at Bailey's, they are selling Delta 8, Delta 9, and Delta 10. And one of those is illegal. So they get away with it by what you just talked about. And it's absolutely not okay.
And sorry, I was actually misspeaking. It's Delta 8. Delta 9's always been illegal. But I confuse the deltas sometimes.
So do we. Anything else? Okay, anybody else? Okay, Regine, you're up.
I don't have anything tonight unless you have questions for me.
Any questions? No? You're off the hook, easy. Sorry.
I just want to remind you, we're going to do the budget meeting on April 23rd. And that will be the only thing on the agenda that night. I've already told Regine, nothing else but the budget. Then the street sweepers, since that was part of the EPA money that we got from the SRF and SLIB, the bid spec has to go through the EPA because this is the first time, I guess, that the state has that they're allowing these projects. So it's been a couple of weeks, but hopefully we'll be getting that bid spec so we can get it out so we can get 2 new street sweepers before the end of this fiscal year. That's all I have.
Hey, thank you. Any questions? None? Michelle?
I don't have a whole lot, just working with the chief on the hiring aspect of things. Also looking for summer employment seasonal positions, which you may have seen out there as well, getting some of those in. Low income water utility discount rates, those letters went out and we're starting to get folks bring those application materials back in as well. HR is never slow, so that's always busy. And that's all I have unless someone has a specific.
Questions? Nope. Okay, thank you. All right. We'll move on to new business, and tonight on our agenda is Karen Weitzel, environmental discussion. Karen, you want to come up, please? And I'll still have you state your name and your address. I guess all of you state your name and your address.
Janelle Honlander, Wyoming. I believe in taking care of our environment, but I do not believe in fear mongering. FISA's Nobel Prize winner in 2022, John Clauser, signed a climate declaration that there is no climate emergency. He and a global network of over 1,609 scientists and professionals that he works with state threat climate science should be less political, while climate policies should be more scientific. What information comes out is fully dependent on what the programmers have put in: hypotheses, assumptions, relationships, parameterizations, stability constraints. Dr. Wallace Mannheimer, a renowned nuclear physicist, who has over 50-year career in nuclear research, condemns net zero as a threat to modern civilization. He also criticizes the climate industrial complex, which he believes is pushing a false narrative of a climate crisis. He describes the complex as an alliance of self-interested businesses, grandstanding politicians, and alarmist campaigners who have convinced many that carbon dioxide, which is essential for life on Earth and which we exhale with every breath, is an environmental poison. Jeb Brugman, who found ICELI and established the UN-sponsored Worldwide Local Agenda 21 initiative, also led the establishment for the Sanctuary Cities movement in the United States. How's that been working out for him and for the people in the big cities? Not well. Teton County used federal subsidies funded by the taxpayers to buy 8 electric buses. None of the 8 are working. Proterra, the company they purchased them from, has filed for bankruptcy. The citizens of Casper hate wind turbines. They rarely are turning, they're an eyesore, and the blades are being buried close to town. But of course, the turbines are lubricated with good old petroleum products. Solar and EV batteries are built using minerals that are mined by children in third world countries. But of course, out of sight, out of mind. Google and listen to Paul Harvey, a columnist who in 1992 spoke on climate change. He hits the nail on the head. You can do it on Google. This is Wyoming, the cowboy state, and now environmentalists want to cut cattle by 50% because of the flatulence. We are also a state that is rich in fossil fuels and minerals that help fund our state and cities. The definition of a hypocrite is when one's own behavior does not conform. The city of Lander was just awarded over $40 million in SLID funds that was generated from oil, gas, and minerals. And now the city continues to push the energy and environmental agenda. And I have documentation if anybody wants to read it.
Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Karen Wetzel from Lander, Wyoming. Tonight, I'd like to speak about Wyoming's climate and give scientific proof and evidence that there is no real climate change concern in Wyoming or the United States. This will dispute the claims of the City Council and their volunteer groups such as the Energy and Environmental Task Force and others who are not experts. I have a book here that was used during a Senate Ag session or a hearing in this year's 2024 budget session. Just to give you a little information. The CO2 Coalition was established in 2015 as a nonpartisan educational foundation operating under Section 501c3 of the IRS Code for the purpose of educating thought leaders, policymakers, and the public about the important contribution made by carbon dioxide, CO2, to our lives and economy. The CO2 Coalition meets to engage in an informed and dispassionate discussion of climate change, humans' role in the climate system, the limitations of climate models, and the consequences of mandated reductions in CO2 emissions. This report is the 4th in a series of state and regional studies by the CO2 Coalition on the effects of the changing climate on various parts of the United States of America. Previous regional and state reports include Pennsylvania's Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative relies on faulty data. Why RGGI is a solution in search of a problem, from July 2021. Virginia and Climate Change, Separating Fact from Fiction, June 2022. The American Midwest and Climate Change, Life in America's Breadbasket is Good and Getting Better, June 2023. The current report is based principally on the work of the following: Dr. Fitz Byron Soypan, CO2 Coalition Research and Science Associate, PhD, Chemical Engineering. Gregory Wrightstone, CO2 Coalition Executive Director, MS Geology, and Dr. William Happer, CO2 Coalition Chair, PhD in Physics. There are other contributors to this evaluation represent the fields of climatology, meteorology, physics, geology, agronomy, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, agronomy, engineering, and more. Just to give you a little information, this report examines the actual projected effects of the climate in the state of Wyoming in response to proposals to reduce emissions of carbon dioxide through the use of carbon capture in order to avert purportedly catastrophic atmospheric warming. This research concludes that Wyoming, like the planet, is benefiting from warming that began more than 300 years ago. Efforts to reduce CO2 emissions are unnecessary, expensive, and would make no measurable difference in temperature. Claims that carbon dioxide is a pollutant posing an existential threat are contradicted by scientific data. Today's level of CO2, while representing a recent increase, are significantly lower than they have been during nearly all of Earth's history. Data for Wyoming contradict the 4 National Climate Assessment and CA4 assertion that the frequency and intensity of extreme high temperature events are virtually certain to increase. There's a whole book of data here, and I don't have time to read it tonight, but it's pretty interesting stuff. And there's also a video that goes along with it. Lastly, I would like to respond to a council member who did not fully understand the ramifications of how at the county convention we were saved by the bell, if you wish. I am reading verbatim from Wyoming statute, Article 3, Organization of New Counties, 18.3.101 through 18.1.303. Organization of new counties. New counties may be organized as provided by WS 18-1-302 through 18-1-320. Petition for organization whenever at least 300 qualified electors who are property owners desire to organize a new county for the purpose of establishing a county government, they may petition the governor to appoint 3 electors residing within the boundaries of the proposed new county to act as commissioners in organizing the new county. Attached to the position shall be affidavits of at least 2 qualified electors residing within the boundaries of the proposed new county, stating that the petitioners are qualified electors and property owners residing within the boundaries of the proposed new county, and that the requirements of WS Wyoming statute 18-1-303 A and B have been met. 18.1.303. Assessed valuation and population requirements of proposed and residual counties. No new county shall be organized unless it, 1, contains a population of at least 3,000 persons and contains taxable property of at least $7 million, as shown in the last assessment. B, in addition to the requirements of the subsection A of this section, the county or counties from which the proposed new county is to be formed shall each contain, after the new county is organized, 1, a population of at least 5,000 persons and taxable property of at least $9 million, as shown in the last statement. There's more to this, but I don't think I need to read it. It just says the governor may require further evidence of population and assessed value. It sounds a little bit confusing, but it's really simple. Somebody just has to apply to do it. We definitely have the 3,000 persons and the $7 million in property. And the other side would definitely have at least 5,000 persons and taxable property of at least $9 million. So it would not be hard if they wanted to kick Lander out because of the environmental stuff that's trying to go on here in Lander. Again, it may seem confusing, but it would be very easy for the rest of the county to remove Lander. What do you think would happen to this town without the support of the county? I think the town would be in big trouble. but I'm going to let the next speaker talk about that. I am inviting this city council and whoever would like to attend a viewing of the 2024 Senate Ag hearing discussing climate and to the documentary Climate the Movie at some time to be determined within the next month that you all would like to attend. I'll pay for it. I'll show it somewhere. You can all come and watch it. And for some reason you feel that this is something you do not want to attend, we no longer trust you to run this city. You're wasting our tax dollars on a hoax. You are not following the will of the people and the Constitution of the United States in many instances, and we will find a way to have you removed. This is not a threat. This is a promise. You work for us, and we've had enough.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I'm Kathy Averill, here from Lander. I've been pretty frustrated with the promotion of all the green energy stuff because I come from a science background and it's not realistic and it has no science behind it. And I couldn't find any science behind it when I researched for my last comment. So tonight, I just want to state that some members of this city council are derelict in their duty to perform due diligence in educating themselves so they can make informed decisions on matters that impact Lander. It's apparent that some council members are unaware, intentionally or otherwise, that the goal of the Marxist climate enviro terrorists is to destroy capitalism by destroying fossil fuels. This is fact. It's embedded in their mission statements and manifestos for the world to see. It's obvious that by pushing Lander to achieve scientifically unachievable debunked green goals, some council members are ignorant of the fact that the fossil fuel industry in Wyoming pays over 90% of our taxes and that Lander is a beneficiary of those severance taxes. I doubt that many, if any, city council members were aware that other communities in Fremont County are so concerned about the negative impact that Lander's green goals will have on them, that the Fremont County Republican Party was overwhelmingly willing to pass a resolution to kick Lander out of Fremont County. A last-minute amendment resulted in a wake-up message instead. I didn't even realize that a municipality could be kicked out or even remove itself from a county until I read the statute that Ms. Wetzel just read you. Lander won't survive on its own. You guys thrive on tax dollars coming from the state and the government, the federal government, and grants and all that. And without that oil and gas money, they won't exist. Those city council members who are committed to dragging Lander into the green wasteland need to do the right thing for the entire community and step down. You've betrayed your oath, you've betrayed your community, and you have betrayed the voting taxpayers. And if you choose to remain on the council, then you need to commit to educating yourself about real climate science. These the documentaries that Karen's talking about are spot on, and you really do need to watch them either voluntarily or we could provide a viewing for them that we'd also open up to the public so they could see as well. If you choose to do neither, then you're a threat to Lander's survival, and you need to admit that, and the voters need to remove you from the council. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to us. We're really concerned about what's going on with CO2. We have to have CO2 to survive. You do the 2050, 80% by 2050, no carbon emissions. Most people will not be living in Lander. We have to have it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to say something just real quick. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding what's going on. We're talking about energy efficiencies of our buildings, our heaters, our air conditionings that are 60, 70 years old, that are insufficient. That's what we're working on when it comes to the green energy, helping us clean it up, helping our city save money so we can put that money elsewhere. Like I said, We spend $16,000 a month on natural gas. We spend $15,000 a month on electricity, and we spend $3,600 a month on lighting through the town, our streetlights. This is what we're talking about, energy efficient and doing that. And just real quick, I'm not here to argue, but this thing that come out carbon neutral, I don't think that's ever come out of anybody's mouth up here that I know of or in my city. So as us being carbon neutral or not, we're never going to survive without our oil, coal and gas. And we know that. So if there's some up here that don't think that, that's up to them, but I know where I stand, and that's energy efficient, and that's what we've been working on. So
we won't have probably anyway, but in Mandarin. And I can assure you that the county of Fremont County is not in agreement with what's going on in Mandarin. And they do not want to continue with this. Mandarin can't survive without being inside my county, at least I don't think.
thank you. All right, we'll move on. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, since there is none, we'll move on. Tim Nichols, FK.
Thank you, Mayor.
Push the little head guy there.
There we go. How about now? Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you today. And for the and to express my appreciation to be back in the community that shaped my youth. It took me 14 years, but here I am back in Lander. And to find it in such a incredibly thriving state. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I have been employed as FCAG's administrator for about 4.5 months now. And in the beginning of that, there was discussions initially on or at least recognizing and diminishing public support for the 0.5% economic development sales tax. And at a critical time and in its uncertain future in November. In response to this diminished public support, FCAG formulated a recommendation that would redistribute the 70% in a manner that they felt may reinstate that public confidence and better secure foundational elements of the economic development for future success of our community. Those elements would provide additional funding for air and ground transportation with the inclusion of ambulance service. And more standardized distribution model for the remaining projects and programs, projects and program funds to be used at the entity's discretion. This recommendation comes with no intent other than Fremont County Association of Governments heard the public frustrations and are here to offer a solution or a recommended solution. The public seems to have an affixed hesitation surrounding the 70%. That much has been unanimously agreed upon. This modified MOU would better define the guardrails for these funds and allocate them to specific silos that would, with any luck, restore public confidence. And should these recommendations prove sufficient, FCAG is simply requesting that in knowing your constituents better than anybody else on FCAG, that you determine whether or not these recommendations are sufficient. With the mere concept of utilizing a sales tax where every resident or tourist contributes versus just the property owner, it is a very impactful tool and one in which the community as a whole needs to do what is necessary to reinstate and answer the community's call to action. FCAG has provided to you their recommendation. Should this recommendation be appealing to you and your constituents, FCAG would then request you authorize your mayor to sign their modified MOU agreement. And I am happy to stand for questions at this time.
Council questions? Councilman White?
How well you know me, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Nichols, for being here. Much appreciated. And I know this has been a lot of work and conversations at FCAG meetings of late. So, and appreciate where you're coming from on this. In the broad brushstrokes, I'm on board with this concept. There are changes to it that I would be an advocate for. I don't know to what extent those would be considered. Happy to share them with you. So, I mean, so try to put this in a thoughtful manner. It was, for me personally, a little frustrating that soon after the county turned back 2 mills of their property tax, then came back to say, we can't afford this countywide service, which is particularly frustrating for me personally. And recognizing that some of the largest expense of running a countywide ambulance service in a county as large as Fremont is to the smaller towns and rural residents. So my preference is to see that the county commissioners do a combination of either reinstating one of the 2 mills and then using the lion's share of the economic development funds that they receive for ambulance service, given again on the location of businesses in Fremont County, they're by and large focused in the municipal areas. And also the transit cost for ambulance services from Lander, Riverton, we're the closest to the hospital. We have some of the lower costs. So I would love to see a slightly different, actually, I would say pretty different reallocation of this. You know, if they were of their 70%, if they did 35 to air service, 5 to additional ground transportation, maybe a little bit more, and specifically targeting that to the small communities like Du Bois that have a harder time like buying a bus for the senior center type thing. Lion's share to, excuse me, to the ambulance, and then 20 or 15% to the projects and programs. So to me, the overarching for me is I'd like to see the county pay a greater percentage for ambulance service and other county services. And have less of those economic development funds dedicated to businesses since there are fewer located in the county. So my 2 cents on it. And thank you for asking the question.
I just have a quick question of clarification on your remark. So your percentage is coming with the percentage of total disbursement through the county, not changing commercial air service for municipalities to 25%, just the county? Okay, thank you. I thought that's what you said, but I wanted to clarify.
Councilman Larson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I'm just trying to get this straight in my mind too. Missy, so what you're saying is that increased revenue that's going to the ambulance, the ground and the commercial air service from the county would come off in this hypothetical numbers that they've got here, the $427,694, it would come out of that. And would go to the additional air service and the additional ground service. Am I correct there?
The ambulance service.
Yes. Okay. And what percentage did you have there to ambulance service? I mean,
I got to make sure my maths.
Yeah.
My next question would be, in the event we want to make changes, what would be the format? Would we as a council then need to come together in agreement of what we would like to see and then present it? And then the mayor could articulate that to the,
Send it to
Okay.
the director. Present your email to Tim. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So the best avenue to modify the tool that FCAG is, presents a unique opportunity to kind of communicate with all the municipalities and entities within, within Fremont County. So it makes sense to facilitate that conversation within those walls. However, it merits clarification that FCAG does not have that unilateral authority to just sign. The memorandum of understanding as it currently states calls for a majority in order for any modification to occur. So kind of in this back and forth discussion timeframe, I think it is advantageous to bring the conversation back to FCAG with any recommendations, which is more than acceptable. And then if any modification to that recommendation seems to have majority consensus, it then can be redistributed from there.
Mayor?
Go ahead, Councilman Murphy.
No, it's my understanding that this MOU is all contingent upon this tax passing again in November. Is that correct?
Mayor, members of
Yes,
the
sir.
council, yes. So the effective date of the modified MOU would, if I remember correctly, and I do, would be January of 2025. So it is contingent upon the sales tax actually passing in November to become effective at all.
Okay, and then what happens if the county commissioners turn their nose on this?
Mayor, member of the council, members of the council. So the wording that currently exists within the memorandum of understanding calls for a majority in order to modify. So with there being 7 entities under agreement currently, 4 would have to come to consensus on the modification. And then it would carry over from there and become effective.
But that would just, that would just be, the town of Hudson would have just as much stroke as the city of Riverton as far as counting as a positive on that.
When it comes to the vote.
Mayor, members of the council, absolutely, that is correct. In speaking of those 2 municipalities, actually, those 2 have motion or authorized approval of the modification.
Okay.
Councilman White.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Nichols, another question with this is, I'd be curious to know what's the county plan if this doesn't renew? How do they anticipate covering ambulance service? I recognize it's stated as not being an essential air service under the technical definition, but I think most residents would say it is an essential service to be provided. So it's also hard to know to what extent folks get behind this idea of reframing it and what's Plan B. And without knowing what Plan B is, it's hard to know how much weight to put in something like this. So, and I realize that's not your responsibility, but
Go
an
ahead, Tim.
observation I've heard from folks of, well, then what's the alternative?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So I will not speak on behalf of the county. I wouldn't dare. However, I could speculate there are alternatives, alternative funding. Now, to the specifics of the ambulance service, this is merely recommending essentially alleviating some burden on the county, right? This does not cover the entirety of the cost of the ambulance, but merely partial. So when we're discussing the ambulance service overall, it really wouldn't have any effect whether or not the tax would pass. However, ground and air transportation would have a significant impact, and those alternative plans have yet to be discussed.
Mayor?
Councilman Stubble.
Thank you,
Yes,
Mayor.
enlighten me.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols, for coming tonight to present on this. I have a procedural question also. I'm chewing on Councilwoman White's proposal, which is intriguing. But I'm curious about timeline and process here. So we have a substantive edit for FCAG to consider. You just, if I heard you correctly, 2 municipalities have already approved the language as it stands without that change. So as I think through the number of discussions that would need to happen and the return to other municipalities, if this change were to be adopted by FCAG, what's the ideal timeline for this approval, for this MOU? I assume we want to have fairly soon, so we're showing to voters the intended use of the funds well in advance of the ballot. So when do you like to have this MOU done?
Next meeting.
Which is on Thursday, I think. Is that fair?
No, on Tuesday, next Tuesday, our
Yeah.
next council meeting. Go ahead, Tim.
Mayor, members of the council, if I might answer that question. So it's Thursday,
Yeah.
Thursday, the 28th, to answer that question. Procedurally wise, the most convenient of dates would be on Thursday. However, that is already not going to come to fruition. So the biggest and most impactful communication that FCAC put forward at this time is that we need to ensure that public understand and communicate with their governing bodies their point of view. FCAG does not, and no municipality should be perceived as making unilateral decisions. So this should be a very effective time to discuss with your constituents their viewpoint. The overall strategy is to restore that public confidence in the tax overall and take whatever steps are needed. So with that in consideration, the timeline would be most effective in the next couple months, just to provide ample time to make sure that is properly communicated to the public of our intention of how to spend these funds better suitable to their interests in the future.
Mayor.
Go
if I
ahead.
may. Thank you. That helps quite a bit. I will say the general intentions of this rewrite on this MOU, I'm in support of. I really appreciate the attempt to provide greater certainty of how the funds will be spent. And I absolutely understand that some of the infrastructural services here, commercial air, ground transportation, even ambulance, are fundamental for economic development, right? What business is going to come to Lander if we're not providing some of these basic services? So I don't see any, I have no opposition, I think, to the idea that an economic development tax could be used for these purposes, and the greater certainty that this could provide is very intriguing. I am curious about, FCAG is it the appropriate forum for this MOU, for coming to some, a more agreement or proposal for us to agree to, I should say, around changes to the MOU, but the greater certainty, there could be another avenue here that the ballot language for the tax is where we make these distribution changes instead of through this MOU. Has that been discussed by FCAG? And can you tell me the pros and cons
You wanna-
thereof?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So that specific discussion has not occurred at this time, though throughout these conversations with different municipalities, the subject has come up. And now that we require a series of approvals in order to carry that through. From my understanding, just based on the historical information on the tax that I was able to collect, this originated with a series of individuals seeking signatures to push it through onto the ballot. So finding consensus to change the wording on the ballot may prove more difficult than modifying, but it might prove worthy of a conversation.
Thank you, that's helpful. And if I do, may follow up and then I'll yield.
ahead.
Do you have, and you don't have to have this, but do you have a sense of when we would have to have that ballot language approved by to have it on the ballot? Is that in May? Does anybody have that information?
I think you're pretty close to being right. It's in May.
So it's similar timeline.
Yeah.
Mayor.
Councilman Hahn? That one here first.
Okay.
Councilman Hahn.
I have a comment. So this, first, I'd like to say that I support this MOU. I don't have a problem with that. And I will say that the half cent is a fair tax. I think the problem lies with, it seems like our citizens are either paying more taxes or subsidizing something these days. And my biggest problem is when we subsidize a private business, well, we're just going the wrong way. I think it's trouble, and looking at what's going up with all these, all the different monies going into all this. I think we're being taxed way too much, and I think the big problem here is with at least the airport and the ambulance. I think they have management problems. You know, we're having to pay businesses to get through everything, and I'm not sure what the airport is now, but it's got to be really big now. It's got to be over 5 million, and I just think this is a problem. As far as your MOU, I don't have a problem with that. Like I said, I support it, but I just think we're going down the wrong, I think we're going down the wrong path. I don't think this is gonna end. And, the ambulance, same thing. I've sat on a lot of different, meetings with that and just bad business, bad business. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Larson.
Yes, thank you. Mayor, it was my understanding, from the tax forum that was there last week that this ballot language cannot be changed. It has to go back to the public in the same form that it was originally passed. Am I mistaken there?
No, I think we're not gonna change the verbiage of the ballot language at this time. That's, with the commissioners and stuff, that they want to leave it as is. The MOU, we can change the percentages as we go on, and that's what if I'm wrong, this is what the MOU is for, is to have that passed, so. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So without ballot language changing, a modified MOU is the only avenue to
Right.
secure these percentage breakdowns of the 70%. So past that, I would rather not comment.
Yeah, that's,
So the ballot language is gonna have to stay the same irregardless.
Right.
That's the way that I understood it.
that's right.
Okay.
Councilman Hahn.
Yeah, I think, I'm not, sorry, but I'm not a fan of the 0.5% sales tax. And I speak to a lot of people who are like-minded. I think a lack of transparency from the get-go is what caused a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And I'm yet to see the numbers to prove that it's actually beneficial. I mean, we've got a lot of people using the money, but I'm not seeing paperwork with numbers showing me the return. I mean,
You can go ahead
it's
and-
gonna take many years to create enough revenue to pay back, say $350,000 or something. So, I'm having a hard time seeing this pass again, and not changing what's being stated on the ballot isn't gonna help that at all. If you're adding more little things to the pot.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So the University of Wyoming conducted their economic analysis, and that has been published. Was it distributed to this governing body? I believe so. So it did render nearly 400% return on its initial dollar.
Right, half of that was included state revenue. It wasn't just Fremont County revenue, that was like state included. So it didn't really, I mean, it kind of broke some down, but it's like the local businesses here that have utilized that. I haven't seen anything, that's showing what they're returning back. I think we're hard pressed to get the money that we're giving back within 5 years on a lot of these.
Yeah.
Just another quick
ahead.
question of procedure. So in the event that the council wants changes to the MOU, what would be the timeline just for agenda purposes for our city clerk about when we're going to discuss that and come to a collective? Because I don't know that, discussion here about percentages and that sort of thing would be something I would be in favor of moving forward at this time, but certainly.
Well, if you could get
Couldn't
your
have-
changes to me, then I could get them to FK. Email me if you have significant changes.
Is it not something that we could put on the agenda for 2 weeks from today? The
I think
business
it'll have to
meeting?
go to FK because they're the ones presenting this agenda and then.
So it'd have to go to
discussion
them
on it.
first.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't, everything, we're just in a time crunch.
yeah, I don't feel comfortable about email conversation in relationship to this topic. I feel like it should be in an open forum.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that that's proper. It is
Yeah.
not proper to do an email conversation.
Right. Just because of the impact, especially to our constituents more so than us.
Right. And agreed. I mean, I think what, Mayor, if I may, what Council Person Cox is asking about is I gave my perception of, if I had my druthers,
Mhm.
but to be inappropriate for the council body to adopt that without having that conversation. Folks might have totally different ideas about it. And so I think if there is enough interest in reshaping the percentages, then perhaps then it should become an agenda topic that we can have in public. And all of us come with our suggestions about how we would build a better mousetrap.
And just to follow up with that,
Go
Mayor,
ahead.
that's okay. Thank you for those remarks as well. And I guess my only concern would be then if it's on such a time crunch, we really don't have time for input. And I think that should be noted, that we've been given this MOU and that it's going to be presented to FCAG as a body, and that as council members haven't had input on the language of the MOU.
Go ahead.
Mayor, members of the council, that's precisely what FK would like to avoid. I would like to possibly redact that sense of urgency on the timeline. It is in everybody's best interest to make sure this is thoroughly vetted prior to adoption. FCAG merely meets this week. We'll discuss the updates, anything brought forward of each governing body, and can discuss modifications to the recommendation at that time. In no way would I emphasize the time-sensitive nature of it. I would rather it be thoroughly vetted by each governing body, and perceived as such, than trying to push this through, especially something that is so critical, as it moves forward.
And Mr. Mayor, it's come to my attention that we have Sarah Hamlin via Zoom who would like to comment on this topic.
She's on the PAC committee for
Okay.
this. I think you have to unmute her.
Somebody's got to unmute her, not me.
Sarah, you're on if you can hear us.
Hi.
There she is.
Someone was returning a pasta maker to me. I apologize. I think that some of the listening to this conversation about some of the questions about the MOU and what the MOU means. I just as a Lander representative for the Forward Fremont County PAC, I just want to make sure that it's clear that the MOU just dictates what part of that money does. And it's still up to the city of Lander to decide what our portion of that does. And so I would encourage you all to think about not the LIFT program, but in fact, what the half cent could do for our community. And those to me feel like two separate distinctions.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, you may.
I mean, I have a question on a different, but clearly related question. I will say before you jump to that, though, the conversation we're asking for tonight is tonight is the moment we have for this to throw our ideas out, hash them out, seek clarity. Mary will represent us at FCAG on Thursday. FCAG might consider changes to the substance here, and then we can go through the process. So I think I appreciate, Mr. Nichols, your clarification on the thoroughness and the time we need to take. If we need to take the time, let's take it. But I would urge this body not to be unnecessarily slow in our own deliberations. Tonight is the moment, I think, for sharing our ideas for the mayor to represent us at FCAG. So that being said, Mr. Nichols, I do have a question about the additional ground transportation allocation here. So there, by the ballot language, 10% is already allocated to ground transportation. This MOU proposes an additional 10% going to ground. Can you speak to the needs there, the uses of that funding, why we're considering another 10% to ground? That's 10% of the 70, excuse me, yes, the 10% of the remaining 70 from each of our allocations. What are the needs?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, actually, I am highly qualified to discuss that. So, that being said, so my initial request for additional allotment of funds from the 0.5% to ground transportation included kind of the strategy in which it was implemented initially. I'll call it the foundational 10% that was allotted to ground transportation really helps solidify the foundations of what WRTA and ground transportation in general is in Fremont County. Previous to which was incredibly unstable and did not render a very impactful service. So with those 10%, WRTA and other ground transportation entities now available those funds, were able to kind of solidify themselves and provide a more impactful service. Now moving forward, just under the initial analysis of what the impact is and the cost, the passenger impact per dollar. There are a few things in place that, when I speak directly for WRTA, were born out of necessity. There are an incredible amount of obligations that WRTA holds in order to generate revenue. Most of which consume over 50% of its resources in labor and fuel. So instead of being so heavily obligated to those commitments in order to generate revenue, this additional 10% of the 77% of the overall would generate enough revenue to kind of alleviate those obligations and better impact and then better focus its impact on the service it provides. What that looks like is I'll be presenting on Thursday WRTA's 5-year plan. And after approved and adopted by Fremont County Association of Governments, would love to share its contents, some of which include, albeit further out on that 5-year plan, very heavily involved lander service in the form of maybe a summer trolley. However, it is very heavily tourist driven. The resources are somewhat available, but it would also better align the impacts of WRTA to better service the greater Fremont County area. That looks in increased frequency. If we're talking in layman's terms, more bus stops, more service area in total, with any luck and a little bit of planning, possible service out to Du Bois and Shoshone, highly likely under this modified recommendation. As well as which I would love to say is heavily weighted on the additional allotment, but effective July would include full safe ride service for both Riverton and Lander, which includes late night and weekend service.
And Tim, if I can add on to that, my understanding from Gary before you is that these funds have also helped increase your veteran medical transport budget, as well as the safe ride budget. And we know in Lander, certainly from the chief of police, that money has been well spent for Lander events and for private businesses to be able to hire people to keep, the amount of people who have been drinking off the road.
Yep. Go ahead. Any other questions? More?
I
Missy?
have one. Thank you, Mayor. Along those lines, Mr. Nichols, my understanding or my impression is that also increasing additional ground transportation would allow for funding for things like senior center transportation. It's pretty tough for Lander Senior Center to buy an $80,000 wheelchair outfitted van, and yet they need them. And same with Du Bois, Shoshone, et cetera. So is that accurate that would also include enhancing services to entities besides Wind River Transit?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, to answer that question, yes. Fremont County Association of Governments recently did develop their ground transportation fund, which generalizes those distribution of funds to other entities like senior center transportation. It does specifically state that those funds are to be used as local match. So when you were talking about 100% purchase of those entities costing upwards of $100,000, it is best to match those with capital grants essentially, which would have purchase at a 20% rather than 100%. So yes, to better leverage those funds, they are accessible to ground transportation entities currently not serviced in the WRTA area.
Anybody else?
Mayor,
Go
one
ahead.
for me on a different topic. If I move away from that. Sorry. So, Mr. Nichols, on the the proposed process here, it speaks about standardizing how the awards of the remaining funds that would be allocated for discretionary projects and well, discretionary projects. But there would be a standardized process that's proposed here where each EDO complies with structure established across all the entities. And there's some guidelines that are presented there. Is the intent that that standardized process would be created through discussion at FCAG or through another entity?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The intention is really in response to public concern. That was the number one kind of echo that continued through each municipality is that the distribution of funds varied greatly. And so this merely calls just for some very vague framework overall to just help standardize eligibility and distribution model. So within that, it leaves a lot of room for discretion. But it does provide some generalized framework to help standardize across the county.
So Mayor, if I may
Go ahead.
clarify, so 3.1 through 3.4 then is the expectation of a standardized structure. There would be no future collaboration on creating that structure. We would then still be adopting, as we are now, the eligibility requirements, et cetera, as long as it met these 4 high-level guidance. Okay, thank you. And then as a small matter, I would recommend that we don't have EDO be the term in this MOU since we don't currently have our EDO fulfill this role. So maybe language to the effect of each party agrees to ensure that their appointed entity, organization, board complies.
Right.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, absolutely. That wording should be, or can definitely be adopted. And I believe earlier in the document, it does specify several different qualifiers, including staff members, because not all entities have an EDO. But absolutely, if not, that can be carried through.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Not, not appropriate. Yeah, thank you.
Could you explain why serious?
Oh, just the work sessions discussion for the council. These people come and got on the agenda because we let our other task force have their say. This is on our MOU with WRTA and the Hampton Economic Development Tax. This is their time for discussion on this without a lot of interruption. So, but thank you, and we'll be around, see how it goes. So go ahead, where were we at? Any more questions here?
Mr.
None?
Mayor, if I may,
Go
I
ahead.
would note, I would certainly welcome any of your comments by email. And I imagine,
That'll work. So.
Just
Go
a
ahead.
final comment. Just to reference what you said and some ideas about changes, distribution changes, percentage wise. Would it be? I mean, the bulk of the document looks good. I think that it's fitting the intended purpose, and I am chewing a lot on the percentages just in my own mind about what that looks like and who's contributing and how. And I do primarily as it relates to the ambulance and commercial air service. In light of what you have said too about the continued support of business, if you will. I'm also very concerned about what happens if we don't get the half-cent. I mean, the reality is air transportation and ambulance service. I mean, we would be in a pinch without, in a lot of ways, ground transportation, excuse me, WRTA. That's something that's been along in our community for a really long time and has benefited us in many ways. And so I guess, I mean, I would like to have a more formal discussion with council about about these changes and what that could look like. So my hope would be that we could put it on the agenda for 2 weeks and that we could collectively
That's what I was thinking.
talk about and then decide on
Yay or nay on it?
yay or nay on the support of the MOU based on does that seem reasonable or?
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't think it could happen earlier though, right? Because, well, I suppose.
It could if the council wants, or I get directed to call one.
I don't, do you think we need one? Or can we do it during that meeting? I think in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
so. But if you had something that you wanted changed on it, if you could get it to me in the next day or two, and I could have Tim go over it. And I don't know, it'd be, at least we'd have it.
Well, I think what we've said is we'd like to have the changes in an open meeting so
Yeah.
that the conversation is public.
Okay, we can do that.
Even though it's public via email, it's a lot more public when we're
Yeah.
sitting up here. I
Okay.
think.
We can do that.
So in 2 weeks, we won't
2
need an
weeks.
additional meeting?
No.
Okay.
Mayor, on that point.
Yes, go ahead.
I would recommend that we invite in a representative of the county, because I think we're gonna be proposing substantial changes that would impact them, so it's worth, I think, in the debate and the question and answer, having a county rep present.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, Councilwoman White, discussion concerning suggesting refinement and eligibility guidelines for the lift application. Sarah's still on?
Yeah, Sarah's not part of the lift
Oh, and
committee
she- I
anymore.
thought she was about
No.
that. So,
I'm not, but I am still here.
all right. Go ahead, Missy.
Wonderful, thank you. So when we voted to reinstate the lift program, I was one of the ones saying I wanted to see more refinement happen before we did that. I was contacted right after that as well by Ms. Marilyn Fisher, who's been on the lift committee since its inception, in large part because, not only because she was willing, but because she was part of the Torrington economic development as well. And she was in agreement that continued refinements would be helpful for that. So as a result, wanted to bring these things forward, which are largely things that we have talked about in our deliberations about awards. And we're also recognizing that there's a certain challenge. I suspect we've all heard from constituents who say we should never support a for-profit business. And we've heard from folks saying, and we should never support nonprofits. They're not generating sales tax, they shouldn't get any. And we've heard folks saying it should never go to the city of Lander because then it's simply, padding the city's budget for other things. And so trying to temper each of those concerns by more focused on what could possibly be eligible, potentially limiting dollar amounts. We've already gone through a number of those already, but we've already decided that a $50,000 award is the maximum award unless something extraordinary happens. So the idea is that trying to get that into one place for us to discuss tonight, and if the majority of us agree with these different points, that then we can forward that to Lyft, have a meeting with Lyft to be able to answer their questions as a committee, and then from there, continue to disseminate to the public, such as changing information on the application, on the webpage, et cetera, for that. So, and in again, also in the broader picture in terms of outcome, it's so that we can have better defined guidelines for our applicants so that we can not waste their time if what they're asking for is what isn't something that's eligible, and that we can have better targeted use for the best results in these funds, that we have better directions, ever clearer directions to the Lyft volunteers for their scoring, and that we can also have greater consistency from us in terms of the kinds of projects are deemed eligible for support. So that's the overall intent of this here. And knowing that there's a lot here, perhaps it'd be best if I asked about, do folks have any questions, concerns about what's currently stated in terms of eligibility?
Mayor, I do have just
Go
a
ahead.
couple of comments. So I didn't get an opportunity to cross-reference the current eligibility versus the document that we have in front of us. And so I do have, so bear with me. On here, it talks about a minimum salary or a minimum wage.
Can we wait till we get to those parts? Like, unless we just want to, like, everything else is good and dive down, but otherwise.
Well, I was just at that part.
Okay.
I was just in the middle. That's just where I was. But yes, I can start from the top.
Yeah, thank you. I think if
That
we
would
do that,
help.
we're more likely to cover all the things and make sure we're in a.
Okay, so I guess my question then for the first part of it would be, what changed within the eligibility from the current standard, the current document to this one? Do you want to, just because on this, it doesn't have the red?
We've not specified that in previous iterations that applicants cannot apply for the same project over and over again. And that's been one of the concerns we've heard from constituents, that a business keeps getting money for the same project, and they don't like that.
Right. So that's the big change, as they cannot apply more than once, which is a good change.
For the same project.
Correct.
You know, so rather than I want a whole bunch of money for a
Mhm.
big project, like tell us a smaller discrete thing and see if it's eligible. Complete
Okay.
that project. Then you can come back and consider a entirely different project,
Right.
but not a giant award for.
Right. And as I've read through this and I'm reading it now, it does, there are significant changes. My question would be, are we comfortable making those with a half a year left? Because the applications are due May 1st, is that right? The new
Correct.
ones?
Yep.
And so is this something that the council would intend to implement and hold to these current applications?
There are none currently in.
Right.
Mostly what we've seen in the past, they tend to come in the last week, if not 48 hours. So if we can, whatever agreements we can come to tonight have plenty of time for prospective applicants to review and digest.
Excuse me, actually, we did get one in
Oh, we didn't
today.
get one.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we got an early bird.
Yeah, so I guess just by way of, I think there's a lot of things in here that look really good. My concern would be the being equitable to the folks that have already applied and or that are or that would apply, because can we vote on this tonight?
Well,
Or is
this isn't to vote on. What I'm trying to get is, can the majority of us agree on these things? And we might, one, yes, another one, no, et cetera. That's fine.
So you'd like to go through like the whole document and?
Yeah. And
Okay.
again, and I hear what you're saying about changing things midstream. If this significantly impacted this particular applicant, I would want them to hear about it sooner than later
Mhm,
so that they can adjust their application. Scratch that.
mhm.
Let me revise it. I think that's a fair thing to do for them, for that. And again, I think this goes back to, we've heard concerns about how funds are allocated and inconsistent practices in that. And I think we are all invested in bettering how we manage these funds to avoid those things. And that's my intent in this. We've had, again, these are largely conversations we've had here in this format. So can we go ahead and get them in black and white and come to better agreement about what is an appropriate funding?
Mhm.
Go ahead.
I believe the eligibility, as it reads there is, I'm good with that, Mayor.
Okay. With this whole new document.
No, just with the, we're just going through step by step here.
Yep.
We're just going through eligibility. Are we ready to go down to finance or?
We gotta go one by one with eligibility or?
Well, that's what I'm trying to get from folks, like, does that work for you? Yes or no? And if no, what needs to change to make it a yes?
Go ahead, Councilman.
If this is in the category, the one-time monies, somebody comes for money and, then they come for money next year, or next month. In this, the way this is written, you can still do that, right?
So the current thing is you cannot apply more than once in a year.
Okay,
What this is also saying is you cannot, in addition to not applying more than once in a year, you can't keep coming back to the well for the same project. So in essence, it's saying it's trying to direct businesses, I'd like to make a small improvement, smaller dollar amount this year, see how it goes. May or may not come up with another project a year later.
okay, so somebody wants to, start a business. They come this year, and then next year, they want to start a different business. That's okay. Somebody that wants to, because we've heard from certain people that they like starting businesses, because they can sell them and that's where the money's at. I would personally like to get away from that. And also, I would like to see something that says if they sell a business in a certain
And-
time, there's going to be a penalty.
Yep, that recapture of funds, require repayment of funds awarded and cost of city staff time to manage recapture if business changes hands, moves out of Lander, ceases to operate
Okay.
for any reason within 3 years of receiving funds. That's one of the things listed on this document.
So
So
that-
we agreed. Again, that's one of the things we've heard a lot and we know gets under people's burr under people's saddle and that's where we're trying to address that.
I'll just leave this.
Yeah.
My only opinion is if somebody comes for money this year, I don't think they should be able to come back. I think we're looking for new people, not the same people. And that's just my comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Great.
Mhm. Councilman Larson.
Yeah, and I think, Dan, what I'm understanding here is that, a person, you mentioned, want to start a new business. Well, there's a lot to starting a new business, and so, what they're trying to do is just concentrate it down to a specific thing. I need, $20,000 for, equipment to do my XYZ thing, okay? And so the next year, if they're still in business and they want to do something else, or they want to come to the lift committee again, it's got to be for a completely different project. It can't be for the equipment that they needed there the previous year. Am I correct there?
Mhm.
Misty?
Yep.
Yeah, it does.
How would you feel about an organization though? Because we've had an organization, a nonprofit put in for it once each year. So an example would be, what if the fireworks came in or the rodeo came in and wanted money one year, then you're not going to give them any money in future years because you've already awarded them money?
Thinking business wise, as far as like somebody like they were talking about the concerts or
Yep.
some of the different,
Well, we would need to know that.
Yeah.
Yes, well, I'm speaking business wise.
Yeah.
Private business.
When it comes to different things, and I think that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and we did have language in there as well that events, primary dollar events would be eligible for repeat funding for exactly that reason.
Business.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Are we stalling out here?
No,
Go ahead.
I'll jump in on this one. I'm comfortable with the idea that we would grant or we would consider granting funding to a business owner who comes to us in a subsequent year with a different business idea. I think we want to actually encourage that kind of entrepreneurialism. And, you know, there's a competitive grant process here. So if someone new has come forward who hasn't applied in the past or been awarded in the past, they're on the same playing field to compete with that person who's been awarded in the previous year. So I'm comfortable that we have currently where you're not gonna be awarded more than once in 4 quarters. I think retain that. But the idea that we would only fund one and done for one business owner or one individual, let's name that person that way. I don't support that. I think an individual should be considered for multiple projects after that 1 year timing. And I think Missy and others for consideration, I think we might be tripping a little bit over here over the word project more than once for the same project. Are we saying we don't want you to apply? And it's really not about applying, frankly, it's about us granting the awards. We won't grant awards for the same business or the same specific business development piece. So the project, so
Yeah, it is intended for the same project.
same project.
Yeah, so there have been businesses that have applied, that have made improvements, generated more revenue, increased sales tax revenue, et cetera, early on. And now they might have another idea for, here's yet another way, like you said, to be entrepreneurial and make a difference. Also bear in mind that some of the concerns that we've had about businesses getting repeat funding were prior to placing a cap on the dollar amount awarded. And that, I think, the combination of those helps temper a lot of folks' concerns about that when they hear about both. There's a lower dollar amount and you can't come back for the same thing. So in essence, we're encouraging folks to say, instead of, I need a whole lot of money for a whole bunch of projects, like, we'll focus on one. And by the way, some of the things you're asking for, like, we're not going to help you fix the roof. That's on your own. You know, you need to do that part. So. Yeah, other thoughts about eligibility?
I mean, I don't want to be a thorn in the side, but I'm not in favor of changes right now. I think I voiced this before when we've talked about Lyft. I feel like I get that we want to respond to our constituents and the concerns. I think there's been a lot of good work and adjustments done to the process as of right now. We're looking at a ballot that's coming, you know, in November, and it's pretty late to make such substantial changes. And when I sit in a position of making decisions, I want to look at it as a totality, not just as the concerned. Whether I agree with how things have gone or not necessarily, I think that we've done a lot of work. We've had a lot of people that have gone over the process of this eligibility criteria and bringing it to us for final decisions, et cetera. So I think for me, I would like to stay out of whether I like it or not. I don't agree with changing any of it at this point in the game. I think that this would make a lot of sense if it's passed again and we reevaluate and we come together with the team of people and input from those all involved and then go forward. So I guess for me, it's probably better that I just stay out of the.
We'll put you as a
Pick
no
ones.
for all of them.
For all of them.
Yeah. And I appreciate that because philosophically, we're opposed on that.
Yeah.
Where to me, I think it's foolhardy to not be as responsive as possible to our constituent concerns and make these changes. And again, a lot of these are not necessarily changes. They're putting in black and white conversations that we've had.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, to defend a point that I think we have done that and how we manage that is when applications come to us or recommendations that we say yes or no based on what we have here and what we've talked about, what we've discussed. And so we're not, like, I'm certainly not dismissing that we're not doing anything. I think we absolutely have. We've put it on hold. We've reopened it. We are taking into consideration all of these things like you've talked about. You shouldn't be able to get multiple awards. That seems maybe not our business, that sort of thing. So I think that for me, for my response would be absolutely, I would make that within how I vote. So food for thought.
Yeah.
Councilman Hahn.
I'll just make a little comment on that. I totally understand the direction you're thinking, but on the other hand, the county is concerned enough that they made a bunch of changes because they're they're hoping to fix things and make it look better.
Prior to the election.
So,
Yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at. And I won't say salvage again because that didn't go over very well.
no, and I,
But the bottom line is there are people making changes because they
Yeah.
are concerned enough that
Yeah.
they want people to see that they're making changes to try to have this half cent, because
Yeah.
everybody knows, everybody up here knows that half cent is huge, because if we lose that, then the burden of everything here is gonna fall on all of them.
yeah,
It's gonna fall on all of us.
I 100% agree with that.
And
I
the
think
airport's a big, you
it's
remember
huge.
in
It's
those
huge.
days,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
big
for
deal.
sure. And I don't disagree with that. I just think that, you know, I would counter, that with, then it becomes a political campaign that I'm also uncomfortable with.
Linda, you said you was gonna.
I know.
Okay, let's move forward. You got
Yeah.
eligibility.
Mayor,
Go
I
ahead.
do have one question on that. Councilman Cox, would you be more comfortable if we didn't apply it to the open round, but it was applicable on August 1st, so that these guidelines, when I'll say the tweaks, would be openly and transparently available to those who are applying in the next round? Would that change your position?
So so my position is, I do think this is a way to get the half cent passed again. And I'm uncomfortable with that. And I'm uncomfortable with it because I feel like we, as a board, and the people that we put in charge of these things have done the right thing. They're not doing it to, we didn't make these mistakes as a governing body on purpose. We collected the information. We knew there were things that didn't sound right, that weren't working well, and we addressed them. And in so much that we changed our procedure to do so. I'm not in favor of changing things midstream to get a vote. I'm just not. I want it to pass. But I think that's a step. I think that's a large step outside of my comfort zone. So.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that perspective, and that's not my intent of this. So, yeah. My intent is that we've been tasked with being as responsive as possible to constituent concerns, and there's still time to do that with the remaining funding. So, yeah, people can have their own intents of things. So what I'm hearing, generally speaking, folks are okay. Enough of us are okay with the eligibility that we can share that with LIFT committee.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
I feel kind of like Council President Cox on it. I think it's a move of desperation to try and gain a vote, just like adding the ambulance service to it. It's like using a fear tactic, like, oh geez, if we don't do this, if we don't pass it, we might not have an ambulance service. All these changes at the very end kind of looks bad, like it was a mistake from the get-go.
Well, if you're drowning, Josh, do you try and swim?
Hey, I was down for changes from when I got into council until now, but all of this should have been explained to everybody, the public as a whole, before it was even on a ballot. Nobody really understood what the 0.5% sales tax was gonna be used for. So
That's right.
where was the transparency on that?
We didn't understand. That's what we're trying to do, is to rectify that.
So it wasn't understood then, but now we're trying to explain it to people and it's too late.
Well, yeah, hopefully not.
So I would appreciate the conversations about that, and I just try to bring it back again. If we can adopt the intent that we're trying to be responsive to our constituent feedback. Like, again, I'm looking at the first bullet of finance. I think that's an important thing to put in black and white. People have been miffed that, you get money from Lyft and match it with money from Move, and you don't have your own skin in the game. So can we just state that you can't use Lyft funds, the matching funds for Lyft funds can't be other economic development funds from Move or Edge? Like, I mean,
Makes
we've
sense.
had, that's not a new thing. We've all heard and expressed that concern. So, and we just put it out there so that applicants know that.
Can we move forward?
Yeah, I would love to.
Let's move forward.
Yeah. So can we agree on that as a? And another one is, we've had concerns about folks not having a formal business plan in order to receive public funds. Whether that should be 2 years instead of 3 years, but it seems prudent to have a path forward of a well-developed business.
I don't know, 3 years is quite a bit. For a new business to come up with, you don't know where you're gonna be at that point in time. I can see a year or so, but to me, 3 years, if you're just starting a new business, you don't know where your business is gonna go or how it's gonna happen. They could go back and give it to you. You know, that's my concern on the business plan, but
They currently provide one.
yeah.
They do not. They do not consistently, and Lyft has waived that
Okay.
as well. And or they've gone out of their way. I mean, bless them for doing that, but I don't think it's the job of Lyft volunteers to help craft a business plan. You know, again, I think that should be business owners' responsibility. If that's not something that you can or are willing to do, that then I realize it's a bit opinionated or judgmental, but that's pretty audacious to then request taxpayer funding to get your business going. You know, I think it's a reasonable expectation.
We do only ask for 2 years financial statements, so maybe two.
So
just-
2 years of,
Okay,
great.
2 years would be good.
Yep. And another one, this again is more letting all of us know that they already do a financial plan. It's information that's kept confidential. They're also reviewed for bankruptcy history, and they are going to be a little tighter on making sure they certify that they're current on payroll, property sales, and income tax. Doing checks with the Secretary of State, and they do already ask, as Shari just mentioned, for the tax returns or financials for the last 2 years for existing businesses.
We're already doing that.
Yeah, so a bunch of that is already being done.
Okay.
Part of it will be being tighter on that.
Any more
Let's agree to
questions on that? Councilman Hahn.
I just wanted to make a comment on that. It goes, and I don't have a problem with this. The only thing is if you went back to where you had a one-time, doesn't make any difference who gets money from whatever organization. If there was one-time money, you wouldn't have to even worry about that top line, worrying about the move or the edge funding. That wouldn't even be needed.
But we don't necessarily know.
Well,
How
that's
they're
the,
gonna-
that's the thing.
yeah.
Everybody should know that. You,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that you're hearing from, when they were talking, the whole time, and I'm gonna go along with whatever, I'm not gonna fight this, so I'm gonna go along with what all of you agree on. But the problem is if you get out of Lander, they're trying to change things and they're trying to do things, and it seems like Lander has always, they fight to do, they're just doing what they want to do, and they don't care. We've talked about this for years. We're at the end of the line, and they've never wanted to make any changes, even though there were concerns all the way from the beginning. And I think that people outside of Lander see this, and they're not happy with it. And it does, it just looks kind of crazy, because they're fighting to do what they want when other people are trying to change things to save the half cent. They really haven't done that much compared to in the beginning. So like I said, I'm gonna go along with whatever you guys want to do, but I think it's the attitude. I think it might catch up with us here one of these days, because people, it's like people, and maybe even people up here are not listening to some of the concerns. So anyway, that's all I have. I'm gonna do whatever you guys want to do, but I just don't, I think that people should come and The business people, I think they should, if they get money from us, I don't think they should be back. I don't think so. Thank you.
Well,
Mayor.
I think you're also, if I'm understanding one portion of what you're saying here is that you'd also like a question that somehow states, I have not or am not applying for funds from Move or Edge as part of that. Great. Now that'd be easy to add.
Everybody
Yeah.
should know, everybody's doing, this is the county, this is the half cent, this is everybody. And it's like we're separating ourselves from Fremont County, doing our own thing, and it may catch up with us one day. Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Can I'm sorry, can I just add something from a observer perspective?
No, not right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman White and Councilman Khan, on that point, I think you suggested language, Councilman White, I am not, there's a certification, I am not applying from Edge or Move, and I think we should add for this project.
Duly
I don't
noted.
think they need to pledge that they will have never or never will apply for a different project or a different business.
Right. Great. Yeah, so in terms of nonprofit, so, there have been some nonprofit efforts that we funded, some we haven't. The ones that are easier for us to say yes to are nonprofits that are hosting the primary dollar events. That seems totally appropriate to continue doing that. Likewise, we specifically funded nonprofits that are services, one that either are very new and or ones that serve as basically workforce multipliers that allow or enhance adults being able to be in the workforce. And then earlier the question came up about the dollar threshold that came from Kevin Krashisnik and his experience with economic development specific to Fremont County, that is the point at which you can be economically independent. So, and we've heard that throughout. When Andy Gramlich was part of this, economic development is not adding another minimum wage job. It's not adding another $10 an hour job. Economic development is adding jobs that are at a self-sufficient level. So that's why I wanted to include that as a mark there that, again, folks should be able to speak to in a business plan.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with these three standards for eligibility for nonprofits. Missy, Councilman White, the way you've organized this document, would nonprofits also be eligible for placemaking facade and signage projects?
Good question. I'm not sure if placemaking and facade and signage is something the council is game to support. We've been resistant to that in the past. So I wanted to keep that as a separate category. It is something that is recognized as a form of economic development by, IEDC, Wyoming Business Council, et cetera, but it's been enough of a burr under our saddles collectively that I wanted to keep that one separate. So if that were something to be considered by this body, then I would say, yes, that is something they could consider nonprofits, for-profits. But again, that might be restricted to a certain geographic location for that.
Mr. Mayor, for the people that have put in for signage, the scoring it's hard for them to score very high because they're not bringing in, you can't validate how many dollars. I mean, those projects that have come in, they just have not scored well just because how our metrics are set up, that's hard to, give it a high
Right.
score for jobs or dollars that it's bringing in.
Right, and that's something that Ms. Fisher has noted in our conversations, that if it's something that is deemed appropriate in accordance with other economic development organizations, that they somehow be reviewed in a different fashion to be able to make that more valid for that.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Morrison.
Yeah, going back to our nonprofit organization eligibility, the primary dollar events, I think that's our number one thing, especially if this MOU goes through. And the dollar amount that is coming into the city of Lander is going to be reduced considerably. I think that the primary primary dollar events, whether it be the Brew Fest, whether it be the rodeo, whether it be fireworks, whether, you know, we've got a bunch of them. And, I think people love those with the gymnastics meet, the softball tournament, or the baseball tournament that's coming up in July. Those things are great, and I think people love them and don't have any problem at all. I'm one of those that is really, I would have to look really, really hard. I won't say that I won't ever vote for a private business, but it's gonna be pretty far down the line. You know, I don't have a tough time being a horse's hind end. You know, I've done it enough during my life that it doesn't bother me. It's kind of like when my mom used to wash my mouth out with soap. And eventually, you know, I kind of got to the point where I like the taste of ivory. And I, you know, got a taste for it, but I think that if we can keep more of this to the general population, these primary dollar events, and stay away from, you know, the signs. You go down Main Street, you see Robeson, he spent a good amount of money, you know, putting up that sign. Why do we go next door or across the street and fund their sign? You know, I just don't think that that's right. But these other things, I think let's take a real hard look at them.
Yep, agree with you. Primary events are important. All right, where we at?
Yeah. Any other comments on nonprofits? John, you gave us a good segue into the for-profits.
Yeah.
So, you know, and you're not the first to express concerns about providing funding for for-profit businesses. So again, we've already lowered the dollar threshold for that quite a bit. And again, another question is, or excuse me, but likewise noting the jobs are created, they need to be at a reasonable level. And so another thing that's been caused consternation for us in an attempt for us to be fair and equitable and not arbitrary and capricious. Sorry, Adam, that you're not here for that, but to also have better specificity about what's eligible. So we've had folks saying, hey, help me fix my roof. You know, help me do, you know, I need to redo the electrical of the whole building as opposed to what I really need is create a walk-in cooler. Can I get funding support for that? So that's the attempt there. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about what is eligible, what's not eligible as suggested there. Are these things we can agree to?
Yeah, I don't think that we want to be remodeling and building, you know, we're paying for repairs that they overlooked at the time of their purchase, or that they just aged out and the building is falling apart. And they need to do some stuff there, but that's not, that doesn't make sense to me.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think the criteria here I'm in agreement with. I would reframe a little bit what you said there, Councilman Larson. I am in favor of considering remodeling projects if it allowed the business to expand and hire more staff. So I like here where it says it's not major repairs, it's not ongoing maintenance, it's not, which is what I hear, it's upkeep. That makes sense to me, but the use of the word remodel gives me some pause because I think I can picture remodels that would create well-paying jobs, right? Knock down some walls, I don't know what it is, you know, add more tables to your restaurant because you have excess storage. Like that would be a remodel that might make sense.
Well, and I agree that like I said, I'm not 100%. I will not vote every one of them down, but it is not the very top of my list.
Got it. Fair enough.
And that's why we've got 7 people voting here, is that if I want to say no, that, you know, everybody else can say their piece and go forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I'm just adding here, Mayor, if I may, that we don't add remodel as a non-eligible project because that wording would cause me some concern.
All right, so,
Get that change.
yep.
Okay.
So next is about the placemaking facade and signage, which again, we've heard from the get-go from various entities that it is an element of economic development. We've heard from constituents that they don't like the look of Main Street of rundown facades, empty facades, et cetera. My intent here is including this language from Port Angeles is simply liking that they provided a fair amount of specificity of what is allowed for that. So I'm curious, first to know is placemaking facade and signage something we can get behind, or is that something where folks do not agree with what we've been told and want to leave that out?
I'm strongly in favor of including this both for profits and nonprofits. And I like the degree of specificity to give us some, well, to give applicants guidance and clarity and give us some standards to abide by.
Pleasure. I think I'd leave it in there. It's our judgment. If they put a lot of money into it and they need a little help at the end, I don't mind that, but as long as they got skin in the game, as Councilman Hahn says.
Agreed. And I think for all of these, our expectation is folks have skin in the game. This is also something where we could place again, a different dollar threshold on what's there. Thoughts on?
I'll just make a comment, Mayor.
Go ahead.
And I'm pretty sure everybody's taken flack over the public art. But.
No.
You haven't? Oh, good. I think most people don't agree with that. That signs and art and all that is, I don't think most people see that as economic development, and that's all I'll say.
Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
I think that's a point of philosophical difference, Councilman Hahn, and so I'm not comfortable with us leaving it as most people, because I hear really strong support for that. And I would just say that I know when I go to a town and I'm driving through and think, is this a place I want to stop and walk? Is this a place I want to go in and get a cup of coffee and spend some more time? The feel and the look of the place matters a great deal. If a downtown is run down and looks frankly a little sketchy, looks a little like, I'm not going to stop and pay at the business. It might look nice, or the business next door that doesn't. So I think the appeal of our downtown, frankly, there's a multiplier effect there. When one business invests in a facade, that other businesses nearby also benefit from the walkability, the fact that people just want to be there. And it's a little intangible. It's a little hard for our metrics to get to, but I think you know it when you see it. And I've heard lots of strong support for the downtown art. So there's a difference of opinion in the community there.
I've said my piece,
Okay,
but I do like, when you see a nice downtown,
makes a difference.
it does, it makes a huge difference. But I think that that's up to the individuals. That the business that owns the building, or the business that's renting the building. I think that they're the primary holders there.
So I'm not sure where to take that. I like it, but I don't want to support it. So I don't know how to interpret that. Is a lower dollar amount threshold something that would make it more feasible? But again, I'm reminded that Wyoming Business Council talked about the Grand Theater marquee being fixed up and back in as like a no-brainer for us to do on Main Street, but yet we said no. So
Councilwoman White, maybe this is a place where we leave this in eligibility. It's a project folks can apply for, and when it comes out of the vote, it's down to each other's, our consciences and preferences at that
That's
point.
right.
But it isn't something we would disallow at the eligible stage or the application stage.
Okay, so it's, that would be an interesting one. I guess I'd hate to have, the applicants put in, spend time reviewing it, and then to go to roll of the dice of what council thinks.
There we go, straw poll them.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Straw poll it then. Right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, right now. Yeah, how many folks would support placemaking facade and signage? So, well, again, if you have other things, I don't think we're gonna have fences on Main Street. We can change some of that language for that. But again, we can clean up that language a little bit about what seems appropriate for that. Thank you for that one. Questions were also raised about to what extent should folks be supporting current Lander businesses? So the reminder that it is already required to follow the City of Lander purchasing guidelines. That's in place already. And also that in the application, they are scored higher if they have a commitment to using local contractors and suppliers. That is also already in existence. So it seemed important to pull that out. So we've had questions about that. So another big one, folks have asked, why can't you use this for expanding things to the parks, at the rodeo ground, at the ice rink, at various things? And I think we've had concerns about using or applying for this as the city to apply for things. And then again, there's the argument for doing so, these projects that can benefit a significant portion of Lander, why not apply for them? So I'm curious to hear at what point we, as a body, think right now there is scoring under community improvement, so broad scale things that can affect the community. Is this a way to get a PA system at the rodeo grounds if this were allowed? It's definitely a harder one. This is one where I think a lot of scrutiny, and duly so, should come to the city about whether or not we think we can apply for this and using city funds. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Councilman Hahn.
I was under the impression that we could do that the city had control enough to use that beyond the economic development. Wasn't there a little latitude in there for the city using some of those funds? Or no?
I don't think there was any latitude.
Seems like it got shut down when we tried to do
did.
that. I can't remember what the
Okay.
project was.
Yeah, but it was
Yeah.
shot down.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Part was funding a salary for that.
Was it the salary, the part of it? Okay, but as far as, you know, improvements up at the rodeo ground or at the ice skating rink or so forth, to me, that just makes sense.
Yeah, I think the question in front of us, Mayor, is not, can we? I think the ballot language allows for can, it's should we?
Yeah.
I think the question is, should we
Yeah.
allow ourselves to do this? And I would be opposed to this.
It's a question
It's a
of,
difficult one, but-
if we were, I would absolutely expect us to follow the same procedures any other applicant and submit it and be scored by Lyft.
Yep, and I think that's a difficult point, Mayor, if I may, is
Go
that
ahead.
we would follow the same applications. Lyft would give us a score, and then we all have discretion to then vote to approve those projects. And are we really gonna vote, no matter what the score is, against the city project? I mean, it would be it feels very entangled and messy to me, and I think it's, I also can think of a range of projects that like we want to get done where this could be an opportunity, but we have budgetary authority. And I think there's other places for us to look and other grant opportunities, other collaborations for these types of things. And I would I would have a real difficulty awarding ourselves taxpayer dollar grant funding.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of framing it. And to me, I think about this as a potential appropriate expenditure for the Maven revenue recapture when that starts coming in to be used for broader city projects and those kinds of things. Thank you. I appreciate y'all's hanging in there for this. I know it's a long document. So another one has come up about whether or not businesses should be able to use the funds for wages. And I think our general gist is we'd like to encourage folks to instead apply for specific equipment or something directly tied to operations as opposed to just wages. And so I have some of those. If we think wages are something that can be funded, that again, we create some guardrails about how that's done. So maybe first, well, the mayor's just stepped out, but sense of whether or not Lyft funds can be used for wages. What are thoughts on that?
Would that be like on the Lita committee getting their executive director.
I think it'd be for, and you know, we got to be fair and equitable.
Yeah.
Not arbitrary and capricious. I'm just trying to be Adam here tonight. I think it would have to apply to everybody.
Yeah.
For wages,
Mm.
we have funded event people for the Climbers Fest, Amon Care for senior health when they were first starting out, and CES to increase their capacity for kids so they could, because there was so many childcares that were closing down, so they could take in more childcares. And I can tell you that some of those people are not making $17.50 an hour.
Councilman Josh Hahn, you had turned on your light.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Are we thumbs upping, thumbs downing? What are we doing with wages?
I think this is carefully conditioned, Council President Cox, and again, we would have discretion ultimately at the end, but I think leaving it open with careful conditioning matters.
Yeah, and there are things when it's good, and some of those examples given, again, providing childcare that we know is desperately needed. And that allows people then to get into the workforce types of things for that. So are folks okay if this is sent to lift as is? Great.
I do have even though you know how I stand, that I do think this $17.50 an hour benefited is an interesting. I would be surprised at who could afford that.
Should we change that to preferably benefited? I think we have that in.
Yeah. I think that's a better, I mean, obviously we want people to be benefited, but $17.50 plus benefits. The school district doesn't pay that for their paras. So
They should.
Yeah.
agreed, but they start at like 16, at $14.95, so.
Yeah.
Could it be scored differentially depending on the rate?
Could possibly.
I wouldn't mind incentivizing that.
I would just add that I think it's a good idea in some circumstances. I think you just have to be very careful on, you just don't want to go overboard on that. I really think you really need to watch what you're doing. Yeah. Well, not just the hourly wage. Yeah, just.
Yeah.
Across the board. You just want to you don't want to use that too much, I don't think.
Right. And again, skin in the game needs to be there. We would not be paying the entirety, or the funds would not. So primary dollar events, hearing a lot of support for doing them. I think this is probably an area where, should this tax be passed again, there's room for better, different scoring matrix that better supports primary dollar events. A lot of them challenge to be scored well, but there's so many events that do indeed assist us and bring in a lot of folks to town. They help a lot of our businesses.
Yep.
They serve as really incredible catalysts in town for a variety of events. This past weekend, folks have just been glowing about what the gymnastics event has done. So, yeah, and then come back again. All right, Scouts Honor, we're getting down to the end. So we mentioned about the recapture of funds. So I had actually wanted 5 years, but Ms. Fisher suggested 3 years is probably more appropriate for that. But the idea of no, you can't, build a business and then sell it in a short time period, without paying back those dollars awards. Does anybody have heartburn about that?
Mhm.
Well, then, anybody have heartburn about doing more to advertise what businesses have received funding from Lyft? Seems like that's totally appropriate to do.
Yeah.
We've all had conversations about that. And then the last one is, I know, Shari, you serve as the city liaison to Lyft. And previously we still have a liaison to LIDA, but LIDA is no longer participating in this process. So the question came up from Ms. Fisher of, would it be beneficial for council to have a direct liaison to the Lyft committee? It seems like,
We had this discussion among our members and they requested that it would be a good idea for a council liaison to go to pitch nights and see what really happens and go to the meetings, because it's a lot of meetings each quarter, but that it would be beneficial for a council member to be.
in attendance. So,
Uh-huh.
so it seems like Lyft, beyond Ms. Fisher is also on board with
Yes.
having a liaison for that.
Mhm.
Great. And since that be a voting, perhaps voting, was that a voting or just appointing?
It's a
But maybe
point.
on the next, our business meeting in 2 weeks, come up.
Mhm.
Can that be a topic for that? Great. And then lastly, as part of that conversation, we had some conversations about better defining Lyft's responsibilities. So they've done a lot of work. Again, it's so kind of them to really work with applicants to build up their application. And there are entities in town and in the county that provide those services. I would really advocate strongly that they provide feedback to the applicant, but not be their partner in building the application. That's just too much. We've also had conversations about increasing more specifics on the reporting information so that we have better understanding what's actually been impacted. And there's a number of ways to do that, but that would be for a future refinement.
Go ahead, Councilman.
When you're talking about reporting, you're talking about the people that are getting money and how it impacts and.
Yeah, but they're
we-
6 month and 1 year reports.
And we've sat all these years and have had none of that. I mean, we
They are in
need to,
Stacker.
we
They're-
need to, you know, the Cinderella stories, you know what I mean? We need to, I think people need to hear that. They need to hear what real life experiences, these people get the money and everything works out and makes a big impact on lives here. I mean, we haven't had that and we need that. And I think the people that vote on this need that too.
Yeah, there are questions in the 6 and 12 month follow-up that's in Stacker, but the questions are kind of broad. And it'd be great to have more specific questions for sure, and also some of the narratives. And one of those, I would totally encourage all of us to go down to Western Printing when I stopped in to ask the benefit of the machine that they have. I mean, Tracy was just glowing about it's been able to keep projects in the county that otherwise had to go out of the county, decreased her labor costs, lowered overall prices because of that, you know, on and on and on. It's just been such a wonderful flywheel for the business. And you're right, that's not out in the public for how big an
Or
impact
them
it's
showing
been.
up. I mean,
Um,
somebody gets money, they could show up in front of the council
Yeah.
and, you know, take a little bit of time and actually, where you could meet these people.
Yep, and that's also what
Yeah.
the Forward Fremont County PAC wants to work on, is getting those stories out and being able to do that in a larger scale so that they're not, you know, just to an individual council and potentially low turnout, but really get it out so it can be shared across the county. Because there have been some pretty remarkable stories from that. Thank you, fellow council members and mayor, for letting me bend your ears for quite a long time tonight.
It's all your fault. John's sleeping.
Yeah, John, I'll buy you a bar of Ivory soap.
So council members, I have a question for you. In February, the council approved Resolution 1320, which provided some project guidance, things of that nature in these terms. So if someone feels like those need to be changed, refined, updated, please let me know. I'm happy to work with anyone on what sort of verbiage that may be to bring it back for an official vote. We need to incorporate some of these topics that you've discussed. And also, I just want to circle back and remind everybody that you cannot email back and forth amongst yourselves. That is a violation of open meeting laws.
So remind me what that 1320 was about, she's talking.
1320 ended the suspension on the distribution of the 1/2 cent sales tax, economic development, and provided guidance for the distribution of the funds.
And so we just need to untable that. Is that what you're saying?
No, it was passed, so you would
Okay.
want to amend it or
Okay,
update it
okay.
potentially. I'm just bringing
Okay.
it to council's attention that it exists as a document, and that if you want that to look a little different, I'm happy to work with someone on that.
Is the stuff that we discussed here tonight, is any of it directly in opposition to how it's currently written?
No, it says that the guidance approved by LIFT, the projects would be capital improvements, community improvements, facade and signage, equipment upgrade, events, business growth and expansion.
Same thing we just discussed.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Mayor, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's worth saying, one, Councilwoman White really put an immense amount of time into these proposals, but also I'm guessing Lyft members did as well, and Marilyn Fisher in particular. So I'm grateful to Marilyn, I'm grateful to Lyft for coming up with these ideas and for, frankly, for rolling with constant discussion from us with sometimes countering points of view around where we want to head with this program, right? We owe the boards that we have charged with different tasks clarity, and I hope that we continue to make improvements to make their jobs easier. It's certainly, I know it's none of our intentions to make it more difficult, so I hope we've met that intention tonight. Thanks, Mayor.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you all. Thank you, Missy. Thank you. If there's nothing else, let's go home. Thank you very much. 10 minutes. Right?